is Phil Rees. I've spent much of my career meeting men and women called terrorists in the West. It used to be said that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But after 9/11, that seemed to change.
Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists.
Western politicians list dozens of terrorist organizations. I'll be breaking bread with those labeled terrorists by the West and ask, when does a man have the right to fight without being called a terrorist? Over 1,300 dead. Over 400 of them children. An invasion committed in the name of a so-called war on terror.
This is an ongoing, long war against terror.
When a people are not free, do they have the right to strike at those who are controlling their lives? I went to the West Bank and to Gaza before the invasion. I wanted to find out, is what the West calls terrorism a legitimate response for a nation forced to live under the control of another? To understand why such carnage unfolds, my journey started not in Gaza, but in the West Bank, the other Palestinian territory occupied by Israel in 1967. It includes East Jerusalem and sites holy to both Jews and Muslims. Parts of Gaza and the West Bank, excluding East Jerusalem, gained limited autonomy in 1993. 12 years later, Israel withdrew its army and settlers from Gaza. But in the West Bank, it retains a large military presence and over 200 Jewish settlements. Two communities are living side by side, yet inhabit parallel worlds. I'm on my way to a Jewish settlement near the city of Nablus. Nearly 500,000 Israelis live on settlements. They are illegal occupiers. Itamar was established 15 years ago by a group of Orthodox Jews who believe they own the West Bank, which they call Judea and Samaria. The town has a growing population with several hundred families. Itamar's mayor is Moshe Goldsmith, who moved here from New York. He gave me a tour of the town. This is the entrance to town. We passed a school there. What's up here? This is Main Street, is it?
Main Street is the main drag. Itamar is a community that is spread out of a huge, huge piece of land. Our goal eventually is to build a very big city here. And no one is going to stop us from achieving that goal.
Moshe expects Palestinians to stand aside while their towns are being constructed. But Palestinians have attacked settlers in Itamar. 16 have been murdered. The settlers are under the protection of the Israeli military and by law can carry guns. Moshe was taking me to the highest point that overlooks Nablus, the second largest Palestinian city in the West Bank. Jews call it Shlem, a biblical name. He brought with him a copy of the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh.
Abraham comes across this valley, settles there in the city of Shechem, and God says to him, this is your inheritance. And then he goes and says to him, lift up your eyes and see from the place that you are, to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west. Everything that you see in this land, and he's standing on a high point, he's looking at the high land, the whole land of Israel. To you, Edmena, to you I will give this. Ulizaracha, and to your seed, your offspring. Ad olam, forever. This is our deed to the land. The Bible is our deed to the land of Israel. This clearly states, and those who read it carefully will find tens of verses that are referring to the Jewish right to this land. This is our deed.
You regard the Palestinians as kind of invaders or people who...
And other people passing through. But again, we're saying, listen, this is the deed, this is the proof. The entire world knows the truth. You can't hide the truth.
But the word truth is an abused word here. The truth is that Palestinians are living under occupation. I've come to a village called Tuba, just south of Jerusalem, and I've come to see a man whom I first met 12 years ago. At that time, a Jewish settlement was being built right opposite him. In those days, there were bitter protests, but the protests failed, and the settlement is now complete and looms over Tuba. I came to see Aziz Abutir and his father, Ibrahim. They invited me for a Bedouin meal of lamb and rice. Their house now is overlooked by the Israeli settlement called Har Homa. Amazing coming back now and just seeing this view of, I mean, it's like a medieval castle, isn't it?
It's a fortress, actually.
I think the bulldozers had just started when I was last here. I remember all that hill.
They started building their monstrous houses.
But, I mean, having to stare at this every day, I mean, it's like some, I mean, it's a statement, isn't it? It's a statement made in rock.
They colonized the top of the mountain to dominate all the villages around.
How does your father feel when he wakes up and sees that in the morning?
Sorrow and sadness. That's all we feel. Sorrow and sadness that we couldn't stop, we can't change.
كان هذا مفجأ كنا لما في الأوقات هذه كنا نزرع نقلع نجيب الزرع نجيب الإشي أكيد نطلع
farm the land. But nothing left. The village is closed. It's surrounded by this settlement, this road, this wall. There's nothing for us left. You know, I mean, you can't even find land to build for your sons, for your grandchildren.
Jewish settlers are deaf to such suffering. Do you think there's a reason why that Itamar was attacked and that people felt such a burning anger inside that they went in and they killed women and children in your town? I mean, do you understand it at all?
Again, it's so unfortunate to think about it again. So you bring me back to those terrible, the black days of people being murdered. Unfortunately, I was on the scene of these terrible terrorist attacks. And to think about how people could actually send their family to go and commit suicide and come and kill, you know, for no reason, killing Jews. And
well, where does that anger come from then? Do you not think it has a cause?
I'm saying, of course, that anger has a cause. But unfortunately, the anger that's been going on, all this was created by the leaders that have been leading their nation astray. And I'm saying this whole lie that the nation is trying to teach them, that Israel belongs to them, not to Jewish people, brought upon themselves these terrible tragedies. If they would really understand the truth that it's a Jewish nation, and you educate them from the beginning, this is a Jewish nation, we are here.
And what do you want from them then? Sort of submission?
To be citizens, normal citizens of Israel, living their lives, working, raising their families in peace with us. Not to murder, not to steal, not to kill. You're in a Jewish country, in a Jewish state. No one's saying leave, but accept the rule of the Jewish nation.
Such are the demands of an occupying power. For the family in Tuba, it's an unacceptable demand.
Another settlement is being designed. Another settlement is being built. Another enlargement to this area.
While the lives of many Palestinians in the West Bank have been shattered, in Gaza, their plight is much worse. I'm on my way to perhaps the strangest political entity on earth. I'm about to enter the Gaza Strip. Technically, I'll be going abroad. The Israeli authorities will be stamping my passport. But Gaza is neither independent from Israel nor sovereign. Israel controls all its borders. And according to Israel and the West, the people who govern Gaza are terrorists. The frontier is one of the most impregnable in the world. During the war, these borders trapped Gazans in the face of Israel's awesome military might. As I entered Gaza for the first time in a decade, it felt like I was landing on the moon. Gaza is under the constant gaze of the Israeli military. This segment of the Palestinian nation lives like goldfish in a bowl, watched and monitored. More than 3/4 of the families here are not from Gaza. They lived in what is now Israel and fled to Gaza's beaches when the Jewish state was created. Gaza is the world's biggest prison. Since the summer of 2007, Israel has blocked the supply of nearly everything except humanitarian aid. There is inadequate housing, sanitation, and education, and very few jobs. The reason for the blockade? There was an election in the Palestinian territories, and a group labeled terrorists in the West won the backing of the people. Hamas was elected in January 2006 as a government that declared the right to use violence to challenge occupation. Western nations say Hamas uses rockets and suicide bombers to target Israeli civilians. That's why it's listed as a terrorist organization. But how legitimate is this definition, which is used by the West and also Israel?
If you logically look at the term and say terrorism is the deliberate, as a policy, targeting, murdering innocent civilians, I think you can find out who is a terrorist in real terms and who is not.
But equally well, if a nation state drops a bomb on a bus, what makes that bombing any different to somebody planting a bomb in a case on that bus?
It's like the difference between murder and manslaughter. The terrorist is deliberately targeting the innocent civilian. If you get on a bus in Jerusalem, blow yourself up and you can see around you all the infants, the babies, the mothers, the fathers. A deliberate act of murder against innocent civilians as a policy. That's terrorism.
We could be talking about Israel's war on Gaza. Before the invasion, Israel, backed by the United States, Europe, as well as Egypt, sought to isolate and weaken Hamas so that it could no longer govern. Those overseeing what's called a roadmap towards a separate Palestinian state say talks with Hamas should only take place once it has renounced violence.
If you took terrorism out of it for a moment, if you just said, right, everyone has agreed, only peaceful means will do, you would immediately remove the justification for the occupation of the Palestinian territory. Now, you can argue it's not justified anyway, that's an argument, but you would actually be in a far stronger position to resolve this dispute. In my view, and I honestly have no doubt about this at all, that the international community would insist on a proper two-state solution, and actually wants that two-state solution. I think.
But is it insisting to Israel? Because day after day, more and more settlers move into
I understand all of
Palestinian
that.
territory.
If you want to resolve this, terrorism is actually the obstacle to resolving it. It's not the way to resolving it.
Do you think that it's right to define people as terrorists and never talk to them or say, we will isolate you? Do you think that is helpful?
They don't want to talk to you. You can talk to the wall if you want. They want to shoot you. Because they say, we don't want peace with you. We want to overpower you. We want to destroy you. So what will be the subject matter of our discussion? Hamas doesn't want to talk.
Before the war on Gaza, this ceremony marked the arrival of new recruits for Al-Qassam brigades, Hamas's military arm. After the war on Gaza, such a brazen demonstration of strength would become the immediate target of Israeli missiles. The movement began what it describes as martyrdom operations. The West calls them suicide bombings, after an Israeli settler killed 29 Palestinians at a mosque in 1995. Hamas then said it had the right to respond by killing Israeli civilians.
We are freedom fighters, and they are occupying our land. They are the ones who are preventing us from being free. Whatever language is used to describe our actions, it will never change the reality. We are a nation that has the right to fight using all possible methods. If they kill our children, we will kill their children. They've killed our women, our men, and destroyed our houses. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This is justified in the Quran. Those who attack you You attack them in the same way.
As the war on Gaza demonstrated, the Palestinians are unable to reply to an Israeli military onslaught. So what option is there left when peace simply allows the building of more Israeli settlements on occupied land and blocks the possibility of a viable Palestinian state? Palestinians control just over half of what the United Nations defines as the occupied West Bank. Israel controls the rest. A potential Palestinian state would be divided in two, and the West Bank would be landlocked and wholly dependent on Israel. Hamas refuses to accept this. Late at night, a rendezvous north of Gaza City with a leader of Al-Qassam brigades. The militants are named after an Islamic preacher who fought against British colonial rule in the 1930s. Abu Ubaidah is the voice of Al-Qassam brigades. I asked him about the targeting of civilians, the reason the West calls him a terrorist. Hamas planted bombs on buses in Jerusalem, killed children. How can that be justified within your conflict?
وإن كنا هنا نضع علامة استفهام على كلمة مدنيين.
I'm wondering why we use the word civilian for Israelis. It's known that the Israeli community is completely militarized. It's hard to find anyone who is not in the Israeli army. Today you see him as a salesman, and tomorrow you see him as a soldier in the occupation army. Today he works for a civilian company, and tomorrow you find him working in the Israeli army.
Abu Ubaidah believes the West sides with Israel for reasons that have nothing to do with any definition of terrorism.
They are not leaders of the war on terror, but leaders of a war on the Islamic and Arab nations. They don't want Muslim nations to become strong. They want to eliminate any spirit of resistance. They want to destroy the spirit of resistance in the name of terror.
القضاء على مصادر قوة الأمة العربية والإسلامية باسم الإرهاب.
The Israelis attempted to obliterate Hamas, but in the same way that Hezbollah survived the war in Lebanon in 2006, Israel has failed. Hamas's military wing remains intact, and the movement retains the support of the people of Gaza. Why do you think they feel this anger towards Israel? And why did the majority of people vote for this group who actually espouses these policies, which you'd call pro-terrorist?
I think that Hamas did well in the Palestinian elections is unfortunately a truism for the region as a whole. I mean, pick any Middle East country that you want to pick and do elections, and I'd ask you who will win. Who wins tomorrow?
Usually Islamist parties win.
Correct.
When there is greater openness.
And why is that?
I would say it's because there's a feeling of injustice in many of these countries, and that Islam offers them a way to resist. Would you agree with that?
I would say the following. People who say that Hamas's political success is because of something to do with us, because of the terrible, policies of the Israeli government. How do they explain the fact that if there are democratic elections in Sudan or Somalia or Libya or Saudi Arabia, the same sort of people achieve power? Maybe it's actually got very little to do with us.
Well, are you saying that there shouldn't be democracy, or these people shouldn't be free to choose their own destinies, their own governments?
Heaven forbid.
One person I was keen to see during my trip to Gaza was the son of a former Hamas leader, Ismail Abu Shanab.
Oh, hello. Hey, assalamu alaikum. How are you?
I met Mohammed when I came here to interview his father in 1997.
This is a picture of me when I was 10 years old. It was taken in our old house, the one that you visited.
At the time, Mohammed's father had just been released from an Israeli jail. Abu Shanab told me that acts called terrorism in the West are a legitimate means to regain Palestinian land. In August 2003, Ismail Abu Shanab was assassinated. Mohammed took me to the place where his father died.
10 minutes after my father left the house, enemy Apache helicopters fired 5 missiles at him, just over there.
Abu Shanab and 2 bodyguards died instantly. Many other Hamas leaders have been murdered in such attacks. The Israelis say anyone linked to Hamas, including unarmed politicians, are not civilians, but terrorists. The young boy I'd met a decade earlier is now committed to fight Israel's occupation in whatever way he can. That means using rockets and suicide bombings.
We only have one choice. We don't have tanks or bombs. We only have this option. Perhaps it will help us to achieve our goals and, God willing, obtain our rights.
In Jerusalem, I've come to talk to someone who understands this war in ways that go beyond the political rhetoric. Samuel Toledano is a former deputy in Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad. He fought for the creation of the Jewish state in 1948 and later advised Israel's leaders. Samuel is realistic about the prospect of peace. There is none.
You know, there is a saying that one man's poison is another man's meat. For us, terror is poison. For the Palestinians, I'm now moving to the Palestinians, it's meat. They have no other way. They tell me, I meet with people from Gaza, from everywhere, tell me, what can we do? We have 200,000 settlers in the West Bank. No government whatsoever will be able to move them. No Palestinian state will ever agree and can agree. So to my best knowledge, speaking about possibilities of peace is maybe something nice, but in reality, I don't see any chance for peace.
Since the partition of Palestine, only one side in this conflict has been given the means and the right to pursue its claim to statehood using a conventional army, and that's Israel. By declaring a global war on terror, the West is, in effect, denying the Palestinians the only means they have to challenge Israel's military superiority. Hamas and Palestinians in general are left with a despairing choice. Either submit to Israeli power and negotiate on their terms, or face the consequence of challenging that power and being labeled a terrorist.